The Council of 12 Worlds met in the Great Chamber of Nexus Prime, a station that floated at the center of known space. Ambassador Vorkith of the Talvari Empire stood before the assembled delegates, his 4 arms folded across his chest in the traditional pose of deep concern. The holographic display behind him showed images of a small blue planet, third from its yellow sun. "Honored delegates," Vorkith began, his voice carrying through the chamber. "We have studied the humans for 50 cycles. We have watched them from beyond their detection systems. We have analyzed their military capabilities, their weapons, their ships, and I must tell you now that we face a threat unlike any we have encountered before." The delegates murmured among themselves. The Talvari were known for their caution, but they were not known for exaggeration. When they spoke of threats, the council listened. High Chancellor Zexara of the Kron Collective leaned forward in her floating seat. Her blue skin shimmered under the chamber lights. "Ambassador, we have reviewed the reports. The humans possess nuclear weapons, yes, but their space technology is primitive. They have barely reached their own moon. They cannot even leave their own solar system. How can they be a threat to the 12 worlds?" Vorkith's secondary eyes blinked in what his species considered a sign of frustration. "High Chancellor, with respect, you are looking at the wrong data. Their weapons are not what concerns us. Their ships are not what keeps our military advisors awake at night. It is something far more dangerous." He pressed a button on his control panel. The holographic display changed, showing a series of images that seemed to make no sense to the assembled aliens. There were paintings of impossible landscapes, buildings that twisted against the sky, machines that served no practical purpose, stories written in strange symbols, songs that made patterns in the air. "This," Vorkith said quietly, "is what we fear. This is what our greatest minds cannot understand. This is what makes humans the most dangerous species in the known galaxy." The chamber fell silent. Delegate Trexel of the Morvani Federation, a being whose species had conquered 40 systems in 300 cycles, laughed. It was a harsh sound like metal scraping against metal. "You brought us here to show us their art, their entertainment. Ambassador, I have conquered worlds. I have destroyed civilizations. I do not fear paintings and songs." "Then you do not understand," Vorkith replied. "Allow me to explain. For the past 50 cycles, my people have studied every intelligent species in this region of space. We have analyzed their development, their technologies, their patterns of growth. Every species follows the same basic path. They evolve. They develop tools. They build societies. They create technologies. The path is logical, predictable. We can map the development of any civilization centuries in advance." He paused, letting his words settle over the chamber. "But humans do not follow this path. They do not develop in logical patterns. They create things that have no practical value. They imagine things that do not exist. They ask questions that have no answers, and then somehow they find answers anyway." High Chancellor Zexara frowned. "I do not understand what you are saying, Ambassador. What does imagination have to do with military threat assessment?" Vorkith changed the display again. This time it showed a timeline. 300 of their years ago, humans believed that flight was impossible. 100 of their years ago, they had machines that could travel through the air. 50 of their years ago, they left their planet. This rate of development is unheard of in galactic history. "Fast development is not unique," Trexel said. "Many young species advance quickly." "Not like this," Vorkith insisted. "The key difference is how they develop. Other species develop through careful, logical steps. Each advancement leads naturally to the next. Humans do not do this. They dream of impossible things and then they make those dreams real. They do not ask what is possible. They ask what they want, and then they find a way to get it." He brought up another image, this one showing a human in a primitive spacesuit standing on the surface of their moon. When they decided to reach their moon, they did not have the technology to do it. By any logical measure, the task was impossible. But they did not accept that. They imagined a way, and then they built it. In less than 10 of their years, they went from primitive rockets to landing on another world. This is their creativity, Vorkith continued. It is not just art and entertainment, it is the way they think. They see problems differently than any other species. Where we see limitations, they see challenges. Where we see impossibilities, they see puzzles to be solved. The chamber was quiet now. Even Trexel had stopped laughing. Vorkith pressed forward. Our military analysts have run simulations, thousands of them. In every simulation where we engage humans in direct conflict, we win initially. Our technology is superior. Our weapons are more powerful. Our ships are faster. But in every simulation that extends beyond 10 of their years, the humans adapt. They study our technology. They learn from their defeats. And they create new solutions that we cannot predict. In 70% of long-term simulations, the humans eventually win. Not because they were stronger at the start, but because they became stronger during the conflict. They invented technologies we had not imagined. They developed strategies that defied our logic. They turned their weaknesses into strengths in ways we could not anticipate. High Chancellor Zexara sat back in her seat, her expression troubled. You are telling us that their creativity makes them unpredictable. I am telling you that their creativity makes them dangerous, Vorkith corrected. A predictable enemy can be defeated. An unpredictable enemy can be contained. But the humans are neither predictable nor containable. They will find ways around any barrier we create. They will solve any problem we present to them. They will imagine solutions that we cannot imagine, and then they will make those solutions real. He turned to face the full assembly. This is my recommendation to the Council. Do not engage the humans. Do not attempt to conquer them. Do not even make contact with them until we understand this creativity of theirs. Because right now, they are contained by their own technological limitations. They cannot leave their solar system. But if we give them a reason to try, if we provide them with any piece of our technology, even by accident, they will reverse engineer it in ways we cannot predict. And then they will come for us. The chamber erupted in debate. Some delegates agreed with Vorkith. Others thought he was being paranoid. The argument went on for hours, but in the end, the council voted to accept the Talvari recommendation. The humans would be left alone. No contact, no interference. The council would watch and wait, hoping that by the time humans developed interstellar travel on their own, the 12 worlds would have found a way to understand the strange force that made these primitive beings so terrifying. But even as the vote was recorded, Vorkith knew that the decision was only a delay. Humans would reach the stars eventually, and when they did, the galaxy would never be the same. 15 cycles passed after the Council's decision. The observation posts around human space continued their silent watch, recording everything the humans did. The data flowed back to the intelligence centers of the 12 worlds, where analysts studied it with growing unease. Dr. Velnix was one of those analysts, a Kron scientist who had dedicated her life to understanding alien civilizations. She had spent the past 10 cycles focused entirely on humanity. Her office was filled with human artifacts, reproductions of their art, recordings of their music, and translated versions of their literature. Her colleagues thought she was obsessed. She thought she was terrified. You have to see this, she said to her assistant Brelax as she pulled up a new file on her display screen. The humans have created something new. They call it science fiction. Brelax looked at the screen with the bored expression of someone who had seen too many human oddities to be impressed by another one. What is it? Stories, Velnix said. They write stories about the future, about traveling to other stars, about meeting alien species, about technologies they do not possess. Entertainment, Brelax said, dismissing it with a wave of his hand. All species have entertainment. No, you do not understand. Velnix stood up and began packing around her office. These are not just stories. These are plans. These are instructions. The humans are imagining technologies that do not exist, and then their scientists are reading these stories and trying to make them real. She pulled up a specific example. Look at this. A human writer created a story about a device that allows instant communication across any distance. The story was written purely for entertainment, but within 20 of their years, human scientists developed a primitive version of the technology. They read the story and then they made it real. That cannot be, Brelek said, but his voice lacked conviction. It is. I have documented hundreds of cases. Their entertainment is a form of research and development. Their artists and scientists work together, though they often do not realize they are doing so. The artists imagine possibilities, and the scientists find ways to achieve them. She brought up another file, and it goes deeper. Their entire culture is built around this process. They reward creativity. They encourage people to think differently. Their children are taught to use their imagination from the earliest age. Every human, not just their scientists and artists, is trained to be creative. Brelax finally sat down, his earlier boredom replaced by concern. What does this mean for the Council's policy? Velnix shook her head. The policy of isolation will fail. We hoped that by leaving the humans alone, we would buy time to understand them. But they are not waiting for us. They are developing on their own at a rate that exceeds all of our projections. She pulled up a new display showing human space exploration progress. When the Council made its decision, we estimated it would take humans another 500 cycles to develop interstellar travel. Based on current data, our new estimate is less than 100 cycles, and that estimate decreases every time we update our models. How is that possible? Because they are not developing logically. They are making leaps that we cannot predict. Their scientists have ideas that seem to come from nowhere, but those ideas do not come from nowhere. They come from their stories, their art, their games, their dreams. The humans have created a society where imagination is not just encouraged but essential. Every member of their species contributes to this pool of creativity, and their scientists draw from it to make the impossible possible. At that moment, an alert flashed on Velnix's screen. She read it quickly, and her blue skin turned pale. "What is it?" Brelix asked. "One of our observation posts was detected," Velnix said. "The humans found it." This was supposed to be impossible. The observation posts used the most advanced stealth technology in the galaxy. They were invisible to any sensor system the humans possessed. But apparently, the humans had developed a new sensor system that nobody had predicted. "What do we do?" Brelix asked. "We have to notify the Council," Velnix said. "The humans know they are being watched. This changes everything." The emergency session of the Council was held within hours. Ambassador Vorkith, who had aged visibly in the 15 cycles since his warning, stood before the delegates once again. "The observation post was not destroyed," he reported. "The humans captured it. They have already begun to study our technology." The delegates erupted in panic. Everything that Vorkith had warned about 15 cycles ago was now coming true. The humans had alien technology in their hands, and if the Talvari's predictions were correct, they would reverse engineer it faster than anyone thought possible. "We must destroy the observation post," Trexel demanded. "Launch a strike before they can learn anything from it." "That would confirm our existence," High Chancellor Zexara said. "The humans only have one piece of evidence. They do not know who we are or where we come from. If we attack, we reveal ourselves." "They will figure it out anyway," Trexel argued. "Better to strike now while we have the advantage." Vorkith raised his 4 arms for silence. "Delegates, please. A military strike would be exactly the wrong response. Remember what I told you 15 cycles ago. If we attack the humans, we give them a reason to unite. We give them a goal. We give them something to fight against. And they are at their most dangerous when they have a clear enemy." "Then what do you suggest?" Zexara asked. Vorkith paused, gathering his thoughts. "We make contact. We reveal ourselves peacefully. We offer friendship instead of war. If we can make the humans see us as allies rather than enemies, we may be able to guide their development in a direction that is safe for everyone. You want to befriend them. Trexel's voice was filled with disbelief. I want to survive, Vorkith replied. And the best way to survive is to ensure that when the humans reach the stars, they see us as friends rather than foes. If we can do that, their creativity becomes an asset rather than a threat. Imagine what they could create if they worked with us instead of against us. The debate went on for days. In the end, the council decided on a compromise. They would send a diplomatic mission to make contact with the humans, but they would also prepare for war, just in case diplomacy failed. The mission would be led by Vorkith himself. If anyone could make the humans understand that the 12 worlds meant no harm, it was the ambassador who had studied them for so long. As Vorkith prepared for the journey to Earth, he reviewed everything he knew about human creativity. He studied their art, their music, their literature. He watched their films and read their stories, and he realized something that both terrified and amazed him. The humans had already imagined this moment. They had written countless stories about first contact with alien species. They had played out every possible scenario in their fiction. They had prepared for this meeting in ways that no other species ever had. When the Talvari ship entered Earth's orbit, the humans would not be surprised. They would not panic. They would be ready. And that, Vorkith realized, was the true power of human creativity. It was not just about inventing new technologies or creating beautiful art. It was about preparing for the future before it arrived. The humans had been getting ready to meet the 12 worlds for generations, even though they did not know for certain that the 12 worlds existed. As his ship jumped into hyperspace, Vorkith wondered whether his people were truly prepared for what was to come. The humans had spent centuries imagining this moment. The 12 worlds had spent only 15 cycles worrying about it. The difference, he feared, might prove fatal. The Talvari diplomatic vessel entered Earth's solar system slowly, making no attempt to hide its presence. Vorkith wanted the humans to see them coming. He wanted them to have time to prepare, to think, to imagine how they would respond. Dr. Sarah Chen was the first human to receive the alien transmission. She was working the night shift at the SETI Institute, monitoring signals from deep space, when her equipment detected something that made her heart stop. It was a signal, a clear, artificial, unmistakably intelligent signal, and it was coming from just beyond Jupiter. Within hours, the news had spread across the planet. Governments scrambled to respond. Military forces were put on high alert. Scientists gathered to analyze the signal. Religious leaders offered prayers, and ordinary people looked up at the sky with a mixture of wonder and fear. The signal contained a simple message, translated into every major human language. We come in peace. We wish to speak. The United Nations held an emergency session. After 24 hours of debate, they agreed to respond. A reply was sent. We welcome peaceful contact. We will listen. Vorkith received the reply aboard his ship. He read it multiple times, looking for hidden meanings, signs of deception, or indications of hostility. He found none. The message was simple, direct, and remarkably calm considering the circumstances. They are not panicking, he said to his crew. They are not threatening us, they are simply ready. His first officer, a young Talvari named Kexel, looked confused. How can they be ready? They have never encountered alien life before. They have, Vorkith replied, 1,000 times, in their stories, in their imagination. They have been preparing for this moment their entire lives, even if they did not realize it. The Talvari ship took up position in orbit around Earth's moon. Vorkith sent another message, proposing a meeting on the lunar surface, a neutral location that belonged to neither species. The humans agreed. 3 days later, Vorkith stood on the gray dust of the moon, looking at Earth hanging blue and beautiful in the sky. Behind him, his diplomatic team waited nervously. In front of him, a human shuttle approached, moving with surprising grace for such a primitive vessel. The shuttle landed, and 5 humans emerged in their bulky space suits. The leader removed her helmet, revealing a middle-aged woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. Vorkith recognized her from the intelligence files. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a scientist and diplomat who had spent 30 years working on questions of extraterrestrial contact. "Ambassador Vorkith," she said, her voice calm and confident, "welcome to our solar system." Vorkith was momentarily speechless. She knew his name. She had recognized him. Somehow, impossibly, the humans had already learned who he was. "Dr. Vasquez," he replied, recovering his composure. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. I am curious how you know my name." She smiled. "We've been studying your observation post for the past 2 years. We decoded some of your files. Your intelligence reports on humanity are quite flattering, by the way. We especially appreciated the part about our creativity being the greatest threat to galactic stability." Vorkith felt a chill run through his body. They had not just captured the observation post, they had decoded its files. They knew what the 12 worlds thought of them. They knew they were feared. "I hope you understand," he said carefully, "that our fear was never hostility. We simply did not understand you." "We understand," Dr. Vasquez replied. "We've been afraid of ourselves for a long time. Our creativity has brought us wonderful things, but it has also brought us terrible weapons. We know better than anyone how dangerous the imagination can be." They talked for hours on the lunar surface. Vorkith explained the history of the 12 worlds, the Council's decision to observe humanity from a distance, and the fear that had driven that decision. Dr. Vasquez listened carefully, asking questions that showed a deep understanding of interstellar politics. "What we need to know," Vorkith finally said, "is whether humanity can be trusted. Can you work with us peacefully, or will your creativity eventually lead to conflict?" Dr. Vasquez considered the question. "Ambassador, I can't guarantee the behavior of all 8 billion humans on Earth. We are a diverse species with many different opinions. But I can tell you this, we did not survive as a species by being destructive. We survived by being creative. And creativity is not just about weapons and war. It is about solving problems, building connections, and imagining a better future." She gestured toward Earth. "We have imagined your existence for centuries. We have written stories about meeting beings from other worlds. In those stories, we have imagined every possible outcome, from peaceful cooperation to devastating war. And the stories that we love the most, the ones that have endured, are the ones where we find a way to work together." "You choose to imagine peace," Vorkith said slowly, understanding dawning in his mind. "We imagine many things," Dr. Vasquez replied, "but we choose which imaginations to pursue. And most of us, when given the choice, choose to imagine a future where everyone survives and thrives." The meeting ended with an agreement. The 12 worlds would share some of their technology with humanity, helping them join the galactic community more quickly. In return, humans would share something far more valuable: their creativity. Artists, writers, musicians, and dreamers from Earth would travel to the other worlds. They would teach the 12 worlds how to imagine. They would show them how to think in ways that were not logical, not predictable, but somehow led to new possibilities. It was a strange arrangement, one that many on both sides did not fully understand. But Vorkith understood. He had spent decades studying human creativity, and he knew that it was something his people desperately needed. The 12 worlds had become stagnant, following logical paths that led to logical destinations. They had forgotten how to dream. As he prepared to return to Nexus Prime to report to the Council, Vorkith looked at Earth one last time. It was such a small planet, such a young species, and yet they had discovered something that the ancient civilizations of the 12 worlds had lost long ago. They had discovered how to imagine the impossible, and then make it real. The council would not be happy with his report. They had expected him to return with a plan to neutralize the human threat. Instead, he was returning with a proposal to embrace it. Many would call him a traitor. Some would demand his removal from office. But Vorkith did not care. He had seen something on the moon that had changed his perspective forever. He had seen a species that was not afraid of its own imagination. A species that used creativity not as a weapon, but as a tool for building bridges. If the 12 worlds could learn to do the same, perhaps they could evolve beyond the fear that had defined them for so long. Perhaps they could imagine a future where creativity was not a threat, but a gift. It would not be easy. Change never was. But Vorkith had learned something important from the humans. The first step to achieving the impossible was imagining that it could be done. And for the first time in his long life, Vorkith began to imagine. 5 cycles after first contact, the galaxy was changing in ways that no one had predicted. Human artists had established colonies on 7 different worlds. Human musicians performed concerts that drew audiences from a dozen species. Human writers had become the most popular storytellers in known space. But not everyone was happy with these changes. The Morvani Federation, led by the aggressive delegate Trexel, had grown increasingly hostile to human influence. The Morvani were a warrior species who had built their civilization on conquest and domination. They did not understand art. They did not appreciate creativity. And they saw humanity's growing influence as a direct threat to their power. "They are corrupting us," Trexel declared at a secret meeting of Morvani military leaders. "Every world that welcomes human artists becomes weaker. They start asking questions. They start imagining different ways of doing things. They start challenging the natural order." The generals murmured in agreement. Several of their own colonies had been affected by what they called the human infection. Young Morvani were reading human books instead of studying warfare. They were listening to human music instead of training for combat. Some were even questioning whether conquest was the only path to greatness. "We must stop this," Trexel said. "We must eliminate the source of the infection." The plan was simple. The Morvani would attack Earth while the Council was distracted by other matters. They would destroy humanity's home world, killing billions and eliminating the source of the creative threat. Then they would hunt down and eliminate the human colonies that had spread across the galaxy. It was a plan born of fear and hatred, and it might have worked if not for one small detail that Trexel had overlooked. The humans had been writing stories about alien invasions for over a century. They had imagined every possible attack scenario. They had developed theoretical defenses against weapons they had never seen. And when they gained access to galactic technology, they had immediately begun adapting their imagined defenses into real ones. The Morvani fleet entered the solar system expecting to find a primitive civilization with minimal defenses. Instead, they found a network of automated weapons platforms that seemed to anticipate their every move. Human fighters, designed using principles that the Morvani engineers could not understand, intercepted their bombers before they could reach Earth. And human ships, powered by engines that combined Talvari technology with human innovation, struck at the Morvani formation from angles that should have been impossible. The battle lasted less than a day. The Morvani fleet, which had expected a quick victory, was destroyed almost completely. Trexel himself was killed when his command ship was struck by a weapon that no Morvani sensor could detect. Across the galaxy, news of the battle spread quickly. The Morvani, who had been one of the most feared military powers in known space, had been utterly defeated by a species that had achieved interstellar travel only 5 cycles earlier. Ambassador Vorkith received the news aboard his ship, which was traveling to Earth for a diplomatic conference. He read the reports multiple times, struggling to understand what had happened. "How did they do it?" his first officer asked. The Morvani had superior numbers and superior weapons, By any logical analysis, they should have won. Logic, Vorkith said quietly. That has always been our mistake. We analyze the humans logically. We predict their behavior based on logical models. And every time they surprise us because they do not think logically. He pulled up the battle recordings and studied them carefully. What he saw amazed him. The human defense strategy was not based on military doctrine or strategic principles. It was based on story patterns. The human commanders had essentially treated the Morvani attack as if it were a scene from one of their war stories. They had predicted the Morvani moves not by analyzing their tactical programming, but by imagining how a villain in a story would behave. They fought the Morvani as if they were characters in a narrative, Vorkith realized. And since the Morvani did not know they were playing a role, they followed the script perfectly. When Vorkith arrived at Earth, he requested a private meeting with Dr. Vasquez, who had become the chief human representative to the galactic community. You knew this would happen, he said. It was not a question. Dr. Vasquez nodded. We suspected. When we analyzed your intelligence reports about the 12 worlds, we identified the Morvani as the most likely threat. Their culture is based on domination. They could not accept that a younger species was gaining influence. It was inevitable that they would try to eliminate us. And you prepared for it, Vorkith said. We imagined it, she corrected. We wrote stories about it. We played games simulating it. We discussed how we would respond at dinner tables and in classrooms. By the time the Morvani actually attacked, we had already defeated them 1,000 times in our imagination. The real battle was just a formality. Vorkith was silent for a long moment. The other members of the council will be frightened by this, he finally said. They will see it as proof that humanity is too dangerous to be allowed in the galactic community. Will you be frightened? Vorkith considered the question carefully. I am terrified, he admitted. I have been terrified of your species since I first began studying you, but I am beginning to understand that terror and admiration can exist together. What you did to the Morvani was not an act of aggression. It was an act of defense. You protected yourselves, but you did not seek revenge. You did not pursue the retreating Morvani ships. You did not threaten to destroy their home worlds. Why would we? Dr. Vasquez asked. In our stories, the villains who seek revenge become the very thing they fought against. We chose to imagine a different ending. You chose to imagine mercy. We chose to imagine a future where the Morvani might become our allies, she said. It seems impossible now, but so did first contact with your people. We have learned that impossible things become possible when you imagine them clearly enough. Vorkith thought about her words as he prepared to return to the council. The report he would give would change the course of galactic history. The 12 worlds would have to choose, continue to fear human creativity or learn to embrace it. He did not know which choice they would make, but for the first time, he knew which choice he would advocate for. The humans had shown that creativity could be a weapon, but they had also shown that it could be something more. It could be a bridge between species that had nothing in common. It could be a way to imagine solutions that logic alone could never find. It could be the key to a future where the galaxy was not divided into conquerors and conquered, but united in a shared dream of what was possible. It was a vision that seemed impossible, but the humans had taught Vorkith something important about impossible things. They were simply things that had not been imagined yet. 20 cycles after first contact, the galaxy had been transformed. The Council of 12 Worlds no longer existed. In its place stood the Assembly of 47 Worlds, a new organization that included not just the original members, but dozens of species that had been discovered or uplifted in the years since humanity joined the galactic community. At the center of this new assembly was an institution that would have seemed impossible just a generation earlier. The Galactic Institute of Creative Studies, a university where beings from across known space came to learn the art of imagination. Ambassador Vorkith, now elderly even by Talvari standards, walked through the halls of the Institute with slow, careful steps. His forearms were thinner now, his secondary eyes clouded with age. But his mind remained sharp, and his heart swelled with pride at what he saw around him. In one classroom, a human professor was teaching Morvani students how to write poetry. The warriors who had once tried to destroy Earth now sat quietly, struggling to express their emotions in words rather than violence. It was not easy for them. Their culture had never valued such things, but they were trying, and that was what mattered. In another classroom, a Kron musician was learning to play a human instrument called a guitar. The sounds she produced were strange and beautiful, unlike anything her people had ever created before. She was composing songs that blended Kron harmonics with human melodies, creating something entirely new. And in the great hall at the center of the institute, a mixed group of students from 12 different species was working on a collaborative project, imagining solutions to the food shortages that plagued the outer colonies. They were not scientists or engineers. They were artists and dreamers, but their ideas, wild and impractical as they sometimes seemed, would eventually make their way to the laboratories and factories where they would be transformed into reality. Vorkith found Dr. Vasquez in her office overlooking the great hall. She was older now too, her gray hair turned white, her face lined with wrinkles, but her eyes still held the same sharp intelligence that had impressed him at their first meeting on the moon. "Ambassador," she said, rising to greet him, "it's good to see you. I heard you were retiring." "I am," Vorkith confirmed. "This will be my last visit to the Institute. I wanted to see it one more time before I return home." They sat together by the window, looking down at the students in the great hall. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Vorkith broke the silence. "Do you remember what I said at the council all those years ago, about human creativity being the greatest threat to the galaxy?" Dr. Vasquez nodded. "I remember reading the transcripts after we decoded your observation post. You were not wrong, you know. Creativity is dangerous. It can be used to imagine terrible things as easily as wonderful ones." "But you have used it well," Vorkith said. "You have taught us that imagination is not just a tool for destruction. It is a tool for building, for connecting, for transforming enemies into friends." He gestured toward the students below. "Look at them. Morvani learning poetry, Kron composing music. Species that were at war a generation ago now working together to solve problems. This is what you have given us. This is the gift of human creativity." Dr. Vasquez smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. "We did not give you anything, Ambassador. We simply showed you what you had forgotten. Every species has creativity. Every mind can imagine. You simply stopped believing that imagination was valuable. You became so focused on logic and efficiency that you forgot how to dream. And you reminded us. We offered you a mirror," she said. "What you saw in it was your own potential, not ours." Vorkith considered her words. In his long career, he had learned that wisdom often came from unexpected places. And he had learned that the humans, despite their youth as a species, had wisdom that the ancient civilizations of the galaxy had lost. "I have one more question," he said, "one that I have been meaning to ask for 20 cycles." "Ask." "When you first made contact with us, were you afraid?" Dr. Vasquez laughed softly. "Terrified. We had no idea what you wanted or what you might do. We knew from your observation post files that you feared us, but fear can make people do terrible things. We had written stories about first contact going wrong. We knew all the ways it could end in disaster. But you came to meet us anyway." "We had also written stories about first contact going right," she said. "About finding common ground with beings who seemed completely different from us. About overcoming fear to build something better. We chose to imagine that outcome, even though we knew it might not come true. You chose hope over fear." "We always do," Dr. Vasquez replied. That is what creativity really is, Ambassador. It is not just the ability to imagine new things. It is the ability to choose which imaginations to pursue, to decide what kind of future we want to build, to believe that the future can be better than the past, even when all the evidence says otherwise. She turned to face him directly. Your people feared our creativity because you saw its power, but you did not understand its purpose. The purpose of creativity is not to destroy or dominate. It is to imagine a world worth living in, and then to do whatever it takes to make that world real. Vorkith was silent for a long moment. Then he rose slowly to his feet. I must go, he said. My ship leaves within the hour, but I want you to know that meeting you and your people has been the great honor of my life. You have changed everything. You have shown us that there is more to existence than logic and order. You have reminded us that we too can dream. Dr. Vasquez stood and embraced him, a human gesture that Vorkith had come to understand and appreciate. Thank you, Ambassador, for being willing to imagine a different relationship between our peoples, for having the courage to advocate for peace when so many wanted war. I only did what you taught me, Vorkith replied. I imagined a better outcome, and then I worked to make it real. He left the institute and boarded his ship. As it rose through the atmosphere and into space, Vorkith looked down at the world below. It was not Earth. It was a planet called New Haven, settled jointly by humans and Talvari, the first truly integrated colony in the galaxy. It was proof that different species could work together, create together, and dream together. 20 cycles ago, Vorkith had warned the Council that human creativity was the greatest threat to the galaxy. He had been right in a way. Human creativity had indeed changed everything, but it had not destroyed anything. Instead, it had built something new, something beautiful, something that would have seemed impossible just a generation earlier. The galaxy was no longer divided between those who feared and those who were feared. It was united by a shared dream of what could be. Artists and scientists, warriors and poets, beings from 100 different worlds were working together to imagine and build a future worthy of their potential. And at the heart of it all was a simple truth that the humans had taught them. The impossible was just the not yet imagined. With creativity and courage, anything could be achieved. As his ship jumped into hyperspace, carrying him home for the last time, Vorkith allowed himself to imagine what the galaxy might look like in another 20 cycles. The picture that formed in his mind was beautiful beyond anything he could have conceived when he was young. The humans had given him that gift. They had taught him to dream. And now, as he faced the end of his long life, Vorkith realized that this was the greatest gift anyone could give. Not technology or power or knowledge, simply the ability to imagine a better world. Because once you could imagine it, you could build it. And that, more than any weapon or military force, was the true power of humanity. It was the power to make the impossible real.